And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another show. And this time, ladies and gentlemen, we have it the AFLW trade free agency and draft review. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to talk everything that happened in the offseason. And joining me, just like last year, are two fantastic helpers. First, we'll go to draft expert extraordinaire, rookie me central head editor, Mr. Pete Williams. Pete, great to see you again, sir. It's like we haven't seen each other in so long.
Yeah, I know. It hasn't been too long between the two draft recaps, I guess. So, no, definitely looking forward to it. This is definitely more of my bread and butter. I see a lot more of the girls throughout the year, so looking forward to chatting this.
Fantastic. And one of my favorite people to talk with. I know that most of the things that he wants to talk about is the Hawthorne Hawks, but this man does so much extra work, so much leg work when it comes to the women's footy that I have to give him his props. Liam, it's great to see you, sir, from the Soaring to New Heights podcast, a Hawthorne Hawks AFLW podcast. Liam, great to see you.
Likewise, Donny. Nice chatting to you and Peter again. And yeah, this is always a fun conversation. Had a lot of fun with it last year, and no doubt we'll again this year.
It was an absolute blast. Plus, the fact that this man has a spreadsheet that is an absolute lifesaver sometimes, trying to keep track of everything that has happened. I know even Peter has used that particular spreadsheet. So I got to give Liam his props on that. Thank you, sir, so much. Fellas, let's jump right into it. We will start with the more complicated part, and that is free agency and the trade period. I know that has a little bit more time since that happened, but I got to say it before we go into kind of the recap. Liam, we'll start with you. An interesting trade period because there were some names that moved that kind of came out of nowhere, shall we say.
Yeah, definitely the obvious name, I guess, in that situation is someone like Lily Methven, who, widely considered the absolute heart and soul of Melbourne AFLW program. Someone who no doubt means a lot to Melbourne fans. And then just out of nowhere, she was, often away to the Gold Coast as part of a deal which was part of some selection management strategies and and perhaps a new challenge for her. Some of the other names were a bit more predictable. We have Eilish Sheeran as well was the big bombshell towards the back end of the trade period, and I mean my immediate response is, "Oh, come on, this just isn't fair." No, there was some really interesting names moving, and a club captain as well from Gold Coast and Tara Bahana moving to Carlton, a move that, I'll be honest, perplexed me a little bit because I thought Carlton's forward line was more than tall enough.
Mm-hmm.
But they disagreed, and that's their prerogative. But no, I thought it was a really interesting trade period overall, and a couple of delisted free agency moves as well, which I thought were interesting. Players moving up in terms of club performance
Mm-hmm.
from the club they got delisted from, and obviously Keely Coyne probably headlines that to the Hawks from the Bulldogs.
Yeah, probably an interesting one at that. I know. Well, we'll go to you, Pete. Kind of the same question, but as a recruiter, did any of this throw you off? Because I know that the draft order really got thrown around with some of the moves in this trade period.
Yeah, look, I think Gold Coast had to get rid of pick two, purely because they didn't want it getting sucked up, because Collingwood was every chance to bid for Havana Harris. So they wanted to get proactive and move. I think in many ways, when it was towards the bottom of the ladder, Collingwood finishing below them, probably not from a coaching perspective, obviously, but from a recruiting perspective, they were probably like, oh, geez, damn, that was just a bit out of that, unfortunately, where they could have picked up both Centra and Harris for basically nothing. So I think from the draft perspective, that Mithun trade particularly helped them because they were obviously able to get Havana Harris for a bag of chips, and then obviously still go and do everything else they wanted to do. Yeah, for me, I think obviously the Sheeran trade. I'm probably the only person who actually looked at that and went, that's a pretty good deal for Richmond long term. And the only reason I did that is because I knew of the strength that they'd be able to get in. They brought in obviously Zoe Hargraves with that pick, who I quite like. So I think that those players that they'll have with those selections will long term be good. They're taking a hit. I think they just looked at it and went, you know what, we're probably not competing in the next 2 years. She's probably got 2 years. We'll give them, unfortunately for the rest of the competition, we'll give them to the strongest team at the moment. But that's what happens. So it's definitely a great deal for North in the short term, but I thought it was still a good deal for Richmond in the long term, because in 12 months, if she wanted to leave, they wouldn't get a first rounder for her. So it's one of those things that I was in the opposite camp to everyone else. I still thought it was great for North, obviously, but I think that the backlash for Richmond wasn't as bad as it should have been. Like, it was a lot. I mean, the backlash was worse than it should have been. So I think they did all right out of it. The one that wasn't mentioned before, obviously Liam mentioned quite a few, but the one that just absolutely, yeah, blew me away, which I'm not surprised by it, but the fact that it was for that deal, was Hannah Ewings to Adelaide. Like, for that selection, like, I understand she's been out for a year and she's obviously had personal issues that she's sorting with, but geez, that is every bit, if anything, that is worse than Sheeran going to North, because she's young and if she gets everything together, like, she's able to find that form and the things she showed at Sample W level, they
Mhm.
have genuinely got a top 10 player for absolutely nothing. They've brought her in and then throw in the draft, which we'll talk about, obviously, Rashid McKee. Like, they have absolutely stolen this trade period. And obviously, between them and North, I think those two have just got that much stronger. But yeah, for me, the Ewings one was surprising. And for absolutely nothing, I thought if she was willing to go other places, I think they could have got a lot more for it, even with the year off. But yeah, that was just an absolute steal. And the only other one I wanted to highlight was Nicola Barr to the Saints, which is not quite Mythen levels, but it's pretty close in terms of like heart and soul kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because for me, you think Nicola Barr, you think Giants, like, you think New South Wales. And that sort of just threw me off a bit, just purely for her going. And then to get 52 for 57, like, in an upgrade, I was like, I would have said she's worth a bit more than that. Obviously, she's had like different issues, like injuries over the journey of points, but she's worth way more than that, I thought. So it was just a bit surprising to see her go. And in the same way as Liam mentioned with Mithen, it was more that case going, oh, geez, she's leaving GWS. Like, it was, yeah, a bit of a shock. But as you said, like, we've already thrown out half the trades, which shows how surprising it really was.
No, 100%. And just the fact, looking at it, that how many multiple team trades happen. It's fascinating how the women's footy managers are so much better at being able to work with each other and being able, like, I know last year we had that super mega trade that had like 13 teams of the entire, like 12 of the teams in the competition all working together in this crazy matrix. But fascinating how many multi-team trades happened in this trade period as well. So 100% with you guys. So we'll go to the staples, and I think we'll probably discuss some of the ones that have already been kind of brought up. So we'll start with you, Pete. What was the move that you think will make the biggest impact for their team next year?
Yeah, look, I think Eilish Sheeran is the obvious one, as the immediate sort of impact player. Obviously, Mithen too, but for me, Sheeran just adds to that depth. Obviously, like, North don't really have any holes. They just went through an undefeated season, but with Carney getting a little bit older, I know Sheeran is right in that boat too, but just provides that extra support off half back, and frees her up a bit because it gives them a bit more space. We know they can play in the midfield, but playing in North midfield is good luck. So I think she'll probably still play off half back, or maybe they'll put her on a wing. Like, it's one of those things that she's got that versatility. She'll obviously add to them straight away. So I think that's an immediate sort of win for them. So if I had to pick one, I think that's the clear one to sort of look at. And yeah, as I said, Ewings and Barr are the other two that I think, if they're right to go, add something immediately to their sides.
Mhm. Liam, your thoughts? The biggest, what trade do you think will make the biggest impact to their team?
Yeah, I mean, look, Sheeran is the obvious one, and I think what I was thinking when Pete was talking was like, yeah, North have clearly seen. I think North have seen Hawthorn on Port Adelaide coming, and said, let's just get flags now, because the North Melbourne are quite an old list, whereas Hawthorn and Port Adelaide are very talented, very young list. It's like,
Mhm.
we can just run up a few flags, we can then rebuild while they're at the top and kind of miss them a little while they're still coming through. But that to me is probably the biggest one. A couple of others I want to throw out there. I want to just what St Kilda did. They've pretty much gone for a whole scale change their midfield. They're getting Georgia Patricios back next year,
Mhm.
but Jamie Lambert's 32. I think she turns 33 next year. They've got Charlotte Boscarin from the Hawks, who only just turned 20 They've gone and got Nicola Barr, who can play a couple of different roles. They've gone and got Amber Clark from the Bombers for pick 8, which I think is a hefty price to pay, pick 8 in that draft for Amber Clark, who's a very good player, but pick 8 in this draft and not asking for something back. Clearly there was some deadline pressure there, I would say. That's nothing against Amber Clark. That's just pick 8 in this draft is worth a lot of currency. But so I know that's not one move, that's 3. But I think what St Kilda have done in terms of that series of moves, I think that'll have a pretty immediate impact as well. Because Charlotte Boscarin, for example, she's ready to go. She's a good player who just couldn't get a run at the Hawks this year and wasn't really in position, but she'll get midfield opportunities at the Saints. And that's starting. And I know this kind of bleeds into some other stuff I'm going to talk about as well, but that's another big impact as well. I know that's a collection of moves. And then obviously Peter's probably going to want to talk about Mattia Breed to Collingwood as well. I think she'll have an impact pretty quickly because it actually gives them a midfielder beyond Davey, Benici, and Can, which they really, really need because, they lost the Western Bulldogs.
We lost to a lot of teams. It finished on the bottom.
Oh boy! So I'm gonna echo you too, but I'm also gonna I'll throw this. I think at least Sherrod is the biggest impact now. Like 100% agree. Like I agree with you, Liam. As North Melbourne just goes, okay, Emma Carney's getting up there. We missed her most of the year. We need that runner off halfback. Boom. There's your guaranteed backup plan. There's your perfect addition there. But I'm also one of those that I think the Hannah Ewing's trade could end up being the one that surprisingly is fantastic for Adelaide, just because if Hannah comes up with her SAMFLW form and her form in her first season with Port, this is a steal for the Crows. Absolute steal for 39. That is a bag of hot chips. Nothing for Adelaide there. I mean, for Adelaide there to give up 39. So this could be an absolute steal. It's also interesting seeing the two Adelaide teams trading with each other. So it's very fascinating to see that they're much more agreeable with each other in the women's yet. They haven't really built that animosity between the two clubs like in the men. I don't know the last trade that's ever been between the two in the men for sure. So, but I think if Hannah's form again, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts here. If Hannah gets her form back, this could be the steal of this trade period. Absolute steal. I know, like I said, North was the steal that everybody thinks now, but Hannah's could be that future one because they're a list that are slowly starting to lose all of those veterans that won a lot of premierships. I mean, Chelsea Randall's not getting any younger. Eventually, she's going to leave this team. So having that youth to come in, I think could be absolutely fantastic for the Crows. So we jump from biggest impact to biggest head scratcher because, as we kind of all talked about, there were some moves that just kind of made us scratch the back of our head and go, why? But I'm interested, especially Liam. I'll go with you. I think one for me that threw my head off, and I'm not trying to lead you here, but Mattia Breed out at Hawthorn was kind of a shocker. So for you, biggest shocker, what was the trade that kind of you went, huh?
That didn't really make me scratch my head in part because I had some awareness it was a chance of happening beforehand. I think it's as simple as she received a better financial offer. She has a job to do and wants to earn the most out of her career, and that is entirely her prerogative and one I'm never going to begrudge her. And I think Hawthorn attempted to come to the party a bit late. By that point, her head was turned. I would have liked to have got more for it, but I don't think pick 1 was on the table because as much as I like Mattia Breed, if it were on the table, I would have flown down to Melbourne and driven her there myself. But the big head scratch for me, not so much the move, but the price paid. I mentioned earlier, Amber Clark to pick 8. Amber Clark is a really, really good footballer. I'm not saying anything disparaging about Amber Clark, to be super clear. Now that that's really clear that I rate Amber Clark quite highly. She's a very good footballer. I think with the picks the Bombers had available, pick 8 should be involved in that deal, but it should not be the deal. Pick 8 in this draft, I just thought was a really high price to pay, and it did kind of it perplexed me. I know what the Saints are trying to do in terms of regenerating their midfield and half forward line, but I was like, that's a lot to give up without getting anything back and to enter this draft in the mid 30s. Just why? You've never played finals. You know, yeah. But yeah, that was the big head scratcher for me was Amber Clark for the price.
Okay, Pete, your thought. What was the move that kind of threw you a little bit for a shocker?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the ones we've sort of brought up already, obviously, Ewing's, as I said off the top, was the one that really sort of shocked me for the value, but you kind of, I guess, understand given that she did have the year off. But yeah, I do agree with what Liam says. I like Amber Clark as well. Like, I think that if it was a later first round, like if it was like a Sheeran deal, like an 18 for her or something like that, I would have gone, yeah, that's great. That's great move by the Saints. That's fair value. That's about right. When I heard it was 8, I thought, okay, what are they getting back? And then I heard they're not getting anything back, and I was like, oh, okay. Look, she's going to be a great player. She's going to be add something to their midfield. Obviously, she has explosive speed. She can play on all 3 lines. She's done that through her junior career. She's definitely going to make them better. It was just more the cost, as Liam says. Like, she's going to be a great player, but it was just like, wow, okay. I feel like if it wasn't deadline day, they could have got a lot more back. So I think that's definitely sort of one that I sort of scratched my head. The other one that we haven't brought up, so I thought I'd just throw it in the ring, is Fremantle trading Hetherington to North.
Hmm.
I feel like for me, clubs are just kind of going, oh, do you need something North to top up? Oh, here you go. Here's an extra depth player, or here's a starting 8. Like, why are all these clubs suddenly giving them players just to help strengthen their depth and all this? Like, it literally felt like that. Because to me, I get it. Hetherington's only really just come in. She showed some promising signs, and then it's like, all right, pick 51. Yeah, that'll do. Like, I feel like everyone's like, hang on, this club's just gone undefeated and won the flag. If this was in the men's, I think most clubs would turn their back on them and go, we're not trading with you. We're not making you stronger. But like, it just seems the deals just seem to flow and they seem to get them. And full credit to North. That's nothing against them, but they just kind of went, yep, we'll get them in. Some of our depth players going out. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. Like, they're just making it happen. Like, they just seamlessly somehow got stronger from an undefeated season. Like, I don't know how that even happens, but they just have. So look, full credit to them. That's unbelievable. But yeah, the Hetherington trade for me was a bit of a strange one just because we've talked about the others, but I thought she was worth a bit more than that. Pick 51. Yeah, I think she's shown signs. I would have thought there'd be other clubs come to the party for that because a lot of clubs need a backup ruck, like Collingwood, for example. But we've done what we can. So yeah, it was just interesting. North had a really easy run for a team that obliterated most of the competition. So yeah, it was more puzzling. Great for them, but yeah, it was just interesting.
I'm gonna ruffle more feathers, and I'm just gonna be bluntly honest because I don't understand the move at all. It doesn't make any sense to me because it was already a problem, and let's exacerbate the problem. Carlton getting Tara Bohanna. What the hell?
You,
You already have one of the tallest teams in the competition with with the Moody sisters and Jess Good. You bring in Tara Bohanna. What? Like, I just like I get it. Okay, Tara Bohanna wanted out because the captain, the coach was leaving. They're bringing in a new coach. You've got. I know that they're trying. I know that they're. Kind of revamping, especially as we were discussing off mic, the fact that Gold Coast is going to be absolutely fire sailing next year to try to keep as many of their academy girls in the ranks. But I literally look at Carlton and go, why? Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand this move at all. Like, I get it. Terrible Hannah is a fantastic player. She's a great full forward. But why did you bring in Celine Moody last year? I don't get it if you're going to make this move because you just add another tall that's not fast, not going to have a ton of tackle pressure. Like, you're going to have no tackle pressure up forward. I mean, it's basically you're going to play skyscrapers and just try to kick the ball super high. Like, that's the only way I can see Carlton being successful. So for me, this is the head scratcher only because I just don't see I don't see the fit unless Celine Moody or Bree Moody or Jess Good, somebody goes back to play fullback because you can't have both of the Moody sisters and Jess Good and Terrible Hannah all running around on the forward line. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me personally. So this one
Mia
through,
Austin too. That's the
what was
other one.
that?
Mia Austin too.
Yep.
Yeah, the rainforest doesn't need more trees, but they've added one. But
Oh my gosh.
I'll give you an example though. We played them in week 1 at the Hawks at Frankston. It was really windy. I was there. I said to my dad, "This game is over." The
Hmm.
second it was windy, they can't play.
Yep.
The worst conditions for big players is the wind. They are the worst
Or the
conditions.
wet.
The wet's not too bad because everyone slows down to your speed. That's fine. Like
Yeah, but it's a lot harder to mark. And most tall players, most of one of the advantages they have is the marking game. And if you can't mark, it kind of ruins, especially the Moody sisters. There's not a ton of speed there. Like I'm being honest, I'm not trying to just be disrespectful, but as soon as the ball hits the ground, they're not at they're worth halves, if not even goes three-quarters of the way. So I don't get it. Like I just don't get it. I think it maybe would have made sense if they would have like if Jess Good would have retired. Like okay, there we go. So now the Moody sisters can rotate as the ruck. You can have terrible Hannah. It's okay. You're still super tall, but it just didn't make it. Like I don't see the fit. I really just don't see the fit there. So.
the forward line applies pressure like a punctured tire. So
Well, we're lucky because Collingwood don't have that problem. We don't have any tools, so if it's windy, it doesn't matter.
we'll
We
actually,
were going pop ups.
we'll adjust it.
Well, I in some situations I think the women's game might be going a little bit like the men's. It's more going to be about speed and skill eventually than it is going to be about height. It'll be interesting to see because I know in the men it seems like it's less about height nowadays. It's more about speed and skill. So, but yeah, that just totally. I scratched my head a couple of times watching that one. I'm like, why Carlton? Like Collingwood would have made so much more. Collingwood would have made so much more sense. But I think in that situation, Gold Coast and Collingwood were kind of fighting over those top picks, so they didn't want to work with each other when it come to points wise. So I totally get it. So, and then I think another one for me, just maybe personally, was Bella Smith being traded out to Fremantle. I'm it threw me off because as the season went on, when Scott Gowans brought Bella Smith in, she really started making an impact for this one. So I was kind of like, okay. So it was another one of those that I kind of looked at, I scratched my head. I'm hoping that he's got a plan now because last year the biggest issue the Swans had was it was Beck Privatelli or bust with no Chloe Malloy and no Ali Morfitt. It was Beck Privatelli going forward or bust when it came to marking targets. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes for the Swans. Is do we see a Giselle Davis? Do we see some of the like one of their draft picks that they brought in the secondary ruck, which we'll discuss a little bit later? Do they have that rotation? It'll be interesting to see, or do maybe we even since this one's picked up Ashley Van Loon. Do we see maybe an Alice Mitchell move forward? So it'll be fascinating to see how the Swans handle that. So I kind of started it, but we'll go on full throat. And we'll start with you. We'll start with you, Pete, on this. Your team, Collingwood, they pick up Mattia Breed in this trade period. Not really much else, considering their bread was going to be buttered in this draft with the number one overall pick. So your thoughts on their trade period, picking up, I think, a solid pick in Mattia Breed from the Hawthorn Hawks.
Yeah, well, the good news coming in is we couldn't go any lower on the ladder next year, so that's always a positive. But yeah, look, I like Bree. We also picked up Early Runnels pretty late, which
Yep.
was a pretty good get as well. Look, their needs, as I said, we have an elite inside midfield, and yeah, that's where it stops essentially.
When
Like
they're
when you got
healthy, when they're healthy too.
yeah, yes, yeah, when they're unhealthy, we have
Love you, Bree and Britt, but when you're not healthy, it really
yeah.
kind of doesn't help.
That's it. So we have like Bree Britt, Can, Tani White when you chuck her in there. Like, I mean, the midfield is fine, like in terms of the inside midfield. You just need something a bit more exciting, a bit more pace, a bit more athleticism. Like, I sort of say this, like they're great at winning the ball and getting it out, but then there's not enough players that'll run and dare and dash. And ever since Chloe left, it's just kind of like you look at the team, And it's just like there's a lot of really hardworking players, but there's not a lot of X factor. Like Eliza James coming in this year was probably our biggest X factor, and she's still inconsistent and things like that. So I think Breed will add to that sort of athletic type. She can obviously play a number of roles for Norwood when she was in, when she was in the Sample W's, I should say North Adelaide. When she was in the Sample W, she was able to play forward, ruck, as well, and obviously she can play mid. So I think that versatility gives us a bit of options. She would be one of our tallest forwards if she went in there. So she's got that option as well. Runnels will provide a bit more outside run. So like again, that's a big tick. I was pretty happy with that. Like I'm obviously really keen to get the picks in, so I was kind of like disappointed we traded them out once we got the 3 top 30s, but I do understand that's for getting the needs in, and we only had X amount of list spots and things like that. So wasn't too unhappy, but yeah, the drafter in me was hoping to see us pick it, but clearly you got to get value. It was interesting because I think we saw both sides with the Breed trade kind of saying that they thought they probably either overpaid or underpaid, like depending on which side you're at, obviously, because Hawthorn fans see her a lot more than Collingwood fans do, and things like that. But I think overall everyone was pretty happy with it. I think if both sets of fans are like, oh, this and that, and you end up going, it's probably a pretty fair deal in the end. So look, pretty happy to bring someone in that's different. Same with Runnels. So now all we need is a tall forward, really, which should be great. So if she plays there, fantastic. Obviously, we'll see what Ash Centra does where they play her, which may well be forward if they can get the ball there. But, as a whole, yeah, pretty happy with what we did. Can't really complain too much.
All right. And Liam, a plethora of moves for that your beloved Hawks do. Like I said, Breed out. I know Lou Stevenson out, but I think a solid pickup in Najwa Allen. She brings some depth to your defensive side. So your thoughts on Hawthorne's trade period?
Yeah, Stevenson and Brady, the only two players we lost. We also obviously lost Charlotte Biscarin, who I talked about earlier. Super talented player, struggled for an opportunity, really good person as well. She only turned 20 a couple of weeks ago, but she has gone to the Saints. That was for opportunity more so than anything else. Stevenson is a loss because she provided something to the forward line, but our forward line was starting to look a little tall and limited with pressure as well. So it might be a nice little change up there. Again, nothing against Lou Stevenson. She's a very solid player. She'll be very handy at the Western Bulldogs. She'll offer some size and some maturity for a very, very young list there who could do with a bit of support at the moment. Keely Coyne, the listed free agent. Matea Braid as well. Those who haven't seen her, I want to give a quick shout out to Brian Barish here because she is stronger than a garlic milkshake, to adapt a quote from Brian Barish. But no, she will be a lot of fun to watch, Collingwood fans. You'll probably want her around the football because she's not really interested in running around players. She is very much, I'm running there. If you are in my way, I'm going through you. I'm not going around you. I'm going through you. But yeah, she was a loss because she was providing a lot of strength and support to our midfield and, was really allowing Emily Bates, Jazz Fleming to do their thing along with Eliza West. But, that's a role we'll need to fill. Hopefully Laura Stone can step into part of that role next year. I want to see her going on ball. But yeah, Najwa Allen, sorry, Donnie, to take a very long way to get to the prompt you gave me. I agree. I think she'll provide some depth to the defence and potentially the midfield at times. I suspect it'll be... our backline was really strong this year. So she may be... Her value may be as much Monday to Friday as it is Friday to Sunday. As that mature player who's got experience, who's been around successful teams. She can play a variety of roles when we need her to come in. So I suspect a lot of her value will be Monday to Friday because we've got a very young back line as well. But she's a very solid player and I think has just been picked to do a steady 7 out of 10 job every week. She gets picked for a couple of years. And then Keely Coyne's the other one as well, who, you can just throw it a dart. You can just cover up the ruck and then throw a dart and say, yeah, you can play there today. Like, just throw a dart anywhere outside of the ruck and she can play there. And I think she's just been picked up. Does a lot of things pretty well. Just can plug and play into any role you want her to. And I think she could be a pretty valuable pickup actually as a delisted free agent because she has also only just turned 20 a month ago. So also very young. But Obviously,
She's
not touching on the draft at the moment, but that's kind of I'm content overall with what we did.
Yeah, I when I saw that you signed Keely Quine, I'm like, that is a sneaky good pickup for Hawthorne. Absolutely sneaky good pickup. I think she's gonna fit in Hawthorne really well with her skill set. I think she's gonna be quite the addition for the brown and gold. So and then I'll cover my group, which surprisingly Sydney was very active in this trade period, picking up is it one, two, three, four, five players in this particular trade period, signing one delisted free agent in GWS cast off Jasmine Grierson, but picking up Darcy Maloney, Imogen Brown, Ashley Van Loon, and Lulu Puller all in the trade period, trading off everything except for that beloved pick four in the draft, which we'll talk about later, which had me giddy as a schoolgirl when it came to who fell to us at four. We'll discuss that in a little bit, but I want to go to you guys really quickly. I mean, I know it's a lot of depth players. This isn't like a flashy like Darcy Maloney could be the nice pickup here. I think she brings depth, some run off of it. She can go through the center. She can go on the wings. She can maybe even go off the halfback line. Lulu Puller solid can go through both ends of the ground. I think Van Loon steps in right next to Brianna Tarrant in the halfback line. And then Grierson, I think, can go, like I said, forward or back, either or. So, just your kind of thoughts on Sydney a little bit, because I don't want to go full on Homer here, but I think they did really well. I know that they did move out Montana Barolton, Ella Head, and Bella Smith through this. It stinks. I think Barolton was starting to kind of find her form. She was a lot of fun to watch. It sucks to lose her, but I think with some of the youngsters, Paris McCarthy, a Holly Cooper, and a Sarah Grundon, that I think Montana was eventually going to slowly be kind of pushed out as the years go on. Ella Heads, I've talked to a few of my Swans fans. This was probably the biggest hurt for a lot of Swans fans, is losing Ella Heads. I love Ella to death. My one worry with her is that she was prone for a miss kick or a defensive lapse a little too much for my liking. So for me, I think Van Loon is an upgrade personally. She's not as athletic, but Van Loon is much more defensively solid, which I think Gowans is trying to kind of shore that up. So just, I'll go to you, Pete. Your thoughts on Sydney, because honestly, I think they picked up good depth, and I think they plugged in a few holes that might have been a little bit obvious this year once they lost Chloe and Ali Morfitt to season-ending injuries.
Yeah, look, I think what Sydney did was they essentially picked up players for roles that they need or that they foresee that they need. Obviously, the players you picked up are largely in that sort of, I guess, bottom 10 of the 21 type thing, but you didn't have to give up much for them. So I think that uh, it's been a good move for those players because I think they'll have a bigger impact at the Swans. Like, you're able to bring in like Darcy Maloney could be a great player, like could be another Laura Gardner type that just needs a chance, like that kind of thing. And you've got Puller and Van Loon, as you mentioned, that'll come in. Imogen Brown was a very good player, and it was a sneaky good pickup by Richmond mid-season to get her because she was looking very good early, and would have gone fairly high in the draft, I think, had they not picked her up. So definitely to bring her back to Sydney, and clearly that must be a move to try and just return home as well. And Richmond get something out of it, so that's good for them. So I think all the players you sort of picked up will be able to make your team better, which is what you essentially want. Like none of them are like league best and fairest winners or things like that. Like, but they're all going to add depth to the various roles, and a few of them are going to really strengthen the side. I think you improved your defense and you improved your midfield. So for me, I think that's a couple of key ins, really.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was telling you, I think, like I said, Maloney is the interesting one. I think she brings a lot of depth and run. And like I said, Van Loon, I think I hate to say it, and some people have kind of gotten some Swans fans have gotten upset with me. I said I think Van Loon is an upgrade compared to Ella Heads. And again, it's no disrespect to Ella Heads at all. I'm not kicking her on the way out. Personally, I just think defensively a little bit more sound, and then like I said, Puller and Grierson, I think bring solid depth, a little bit more veteran experience. Because if you look at it, the Swans have a ton of young talent. They've got Sophia Hurley, they've got Mon Ham if they can keep her healthy. They've got Grundon, they've got Hausinger, and then they with the pickup that they pick up in the draft, there's a lot of really young players under 22 that are on this Swan side that I think if they can keep Chloe healthy and Ali Morfitt can stay healthy, anything's possible next year for the Swans for sure. So, all right, fellas, anything else that you guys want to talk about in the trade and free agency period? Because again, it was a weird free agency and trade period. I think there also the talk of I'll go to you, Liam, on this. Is that was there more disappointment that we saw some trades fall through? Like I know, Paige Scott ended up having to go to the draft because her trade to Richmond fell through. Taylor Harris trade that it sounded like I think Hawthorne was one of the destinations, but Hawthorne refused to trade the top pick that they had. I can't remember what the number was. I'm not going to dive into the particulars. And now she resigns. I know Amelia Yasir from Richmond wanted out. She ended up resigning with Richmond. So, like, I almost for me this trade period does have that little bit of what trades didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, checking something. A lot of clubs. Well, I think Peter, you and I had this conversation, and this is a very Australian reference, but a lot of clubs heard, "Can we have your first round pick?" Or said that. What a club heard was, "Am I ever going to see your face again?" And then respond as Australians respond to that question. But it was a really interesting trade. The Taylor Harris one is probably the obvious one that really sticks out as a deal that didn't get done because Hawthorn weren't parting with 14. Melbourne, up until the day of the draft when it became apparent that Amy Mackin was staying in Melbourne, only had two list spots. So they only had pick 2 and pick 20. So pick 14 would have made pick 20 meaningless. And then when the Hawks weren't offering 14, pick 22 to them would have essentially been giving away Taylor Harris for free.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you. If I'm Melbourne and she's open to staying, I'm probably not giving her away for free. So, yeah, that is definitely a big one. And you do sit there and think, okay, what if, what other things could have happened? What other what other moves might that have triggered? And look, at the end of the day, you never know. But no, that was one of the most interesting storylines, especially as a Hawthorn supporter to follow. About obviously I'm using Taylor Harris, but Paige Scott and their trade to the Tigers and Amelia Yasir going the other way to the Bombers. The Tigers won out there. They got Yasir to re-sign and they got Paige Scott in the draft, so they got the best of both worlds there at the Tigers. But no, those trades that fell through were really quite interesting. It's probably the first time it's really happened in the W to the best of my recollection. I'm sure it has in the past, but to the best of my recollection, it's the first time I've really seen meaningful trades fall through, especially when they've involved in interstate moves, it probably always happen because in the AFLW there are provisions around that in the CBA for interstate moves. But yeah, it's probably the first time I've really seen trades fall through in the AFLW, and it was quite interesting actually to observe how different players and clubs then approach that afterwards.
It'll definitely be interesting. But I know in the men's there's always this adage of it'll get done, and to see the trade the trade period deadline come and for two or three trades that everybody was like it's going to get done for it not to happen it's kind of anticlimactic because you're kind of like I'm interested to see what's going to go what way. So to see those trades fall through, it was interesting. So as much as I love this free agency and trade period because of its kind of somewhat unpredictability at times, let's go to what I think was even more the unpredictability, and that was this draft. Because Pete, let's go straight to it before we even talk the trade, before we even talk the picks, because I mean this was a draft of drafts, one of the best talented crops we've ever seen. The insanity of draft night, because I remember talking with you, and I know I've went back and forth with both of you, and we had no idea after Ask Centra what the hell was going to happen because we sat here, we knew Melbourne had two, and there were so many different machinations. Would they bid for Havana Harris? Were they going? Who were they going to take? Were they going to take Zip? Were they going to take Zippy Fish? There were all these rumors that they were super high on Molly O'Hara out of WA and South Fremantle. And then how would GWS handle their pick at pick 3 originally, which would then eventually come to pick 4 after the bid for Havana Harris. But the unpredictability of this draft was nuts.
Yeah. No, like, I mean, by pick two, every fandom draft was wrong because no one thought Melbourne were going to bid on Ivana Harris. So that was nice to get it out of the way. Everyone was sort of arguing what Sydney would do and then what Essendon would do. And then Melbourne went, nah, we're just going to bugger it up for you all. So that was really great. Yeah, look, I mean, it was one of those drafts that I've never seen anything like it. Like, it's not just the general public, like the stuff that you saw a lot in Phantom drafts, was a lot what the recruiters were saying. Like, most of them were expecting GWS to pick Bellany, and when that didn't happen, it triggered a series of events that was just incredible. Like, because then all of a sudden, like, it's so, because from all words, like, it was expected Sydney were going to pick up Rashid, but then if Fish was available, potentially that was going to be the way. But then it was like they were like, it wasn't sure because then it was going to slide to Adelaide, and you had all these scenarios in between. Carlton then obviously, because they couldn't get Fish, were then going to go that same way that they did with Schultz. And if Schultz had been on the board, she would have slid down to the teens. And you had McDonald there, who I was confident was going to go the Dogs, but a lot of clubs didn't know what the Dogs were going to do because the Dogs were there. So when the Dogs got her, I was pretty happy because that was the one where it could have gone either way. But it just kept, it was bonkers essentially. So once GWS picked Howley, it was like, well, got no idea what's happening here. So yeah, because all the word was she was going to go later on in the draft. So, and that GWS were picking Bellany. So yeah, it really buggered up, and I had to chuckle when, like, the Phantom I'd done the mid draft picks. I'd got about 3 or 4 in a row when it was meant to be complete chaos. Yet the top 10 was harder to get than the teens. And I was like, the teens was meant to be the difficult part. So that was really a bit of a funny moment. And a couple of the people who were next to me said, I reckon when some of these girls went to these clubs that you'd picked right, you celebrated more than they did. Because it was just completely bonkers that you were just enjoying anyone you got right, basically. So, yeah, it was pretty good to get a few right, but yeah, it was incredibly difficult. But that's what makes it exciting. It's such a great experience because you don't want it to always be predictable. So it was great to see that clubs didn't have a clue what other clubs were doing for a change. That was really nice. So, yeah, no, it was really a good draft. Really enjoyed it. And as you said, the strength was like nothing we've seen before. So, all the clubs should come away pretty happy with their different draft targets and I guess what they were able to pick up.
As someone who did a full mock draft, by the way, as Peter knows, which I worked way too hard on, and it was also wrong by pick 2. You were celebrating really hard anything you got right. I sent Peter really smug text when Geelong went Sienna Talariti with their second pick. I sent Peter a really smug text. But because Peter and I were chatting throughout the whole draft, just pinging each other texts while I was running a space on the Soaring to New Heights socials. And essentially it looks like I think I could have done a more accurate mock draft if I'd have swallowed all the names, threw up, and then said, yeah, you, and just did it that way.
Yeah, because that was the first thing I was going to ask you, Liam. I was going to go. How quickly did your mock unravel after Havana Harris went through, and you kind of already went through it there? But I remember because I did the same thing, Liam. I remember messaging after Zippy Fish fell to Sydney at 4. I literally texted him, what that, like, because I had literally, Pete can vouch for me. I asked him 2 months ago. I said, "Is there any way Zippy Fish falls to Sydney at 4? Is there any way?" Because that was the one thing I was thinking. Because it was like, in the back of my mind, I had told a lot of the Swans fans. Everybody was like, "Dottie, what do you think they'll do it for? What do you think they'll do it for?" Because they know I cover the women a little bit more than I do the men. And I said, "There's 3." I said, "There's 3 that I'm looking at that I think all could be at 4, but I'm not 100% sure." I said the 2 WA girls, Zippy Fish, Molly O'Hare. Those were the first 2 in the back of my head, and Indy Rashid sitting there was the other 3. I knew those were the 3 that Sydney could look at. Indy Rashid fills the forward hole that they would need because of the fact that they were so Beck Privatelli centered going forward. Zippy Fish brings them another quick midfielder that they can put on the wing or maybe even the halfback flanker. And Molly O'Hare is the perfect replacement since of all the rumors that Ella Heads potentially was out the door. So it was like, so when Zippy Fish fell to him, like literally when they got to 4, and Zippy Fish was still on the board. And I remember hearing Riley Beveridge say, "I'm hearing rumors Zippy Fish could be available at 4." I remember texting a Swans fan who I had talked with, and he had circled Emma McDonald, who I know Liam, you and I, when we went back and forth, that was who you had mocked to them, and Indy Rashid were the two that he put down. And I messaged him and I said, "Be careful. Zippy Fish could be available at 4. I think the Swans pick. I think the Swans go for her." And the funny part is, after that pick happened, he specifically put out there. He goes, "This is why I listen to Coach all the time." So, but I could not believe that she fell to 4. It just legitimately. I mean, Pete even said, he goes, "I'm not sure if 4 is going to be available, especially because at the time there were rumors Charlie Rowbottom was being courted by Sydney, and I agree with him. I think 4 would have had to go out the door to bring in Charlie, but it was bonkers." And I remember messaging, and he said, he goes, "This is insane." He goes, "We're 4 picks in, and it's already buggered everything up." So, so after that, so it's the celebration. So I'm just going to go to it. I'll kind of cover this. One of the names that I've already kind of brought up, and this Indy Rashid dropping to Adelaide at 13. I mean, if you're the Adelaide Crows, you are doing jigs in the streets, because not only do you get a homegrown talent, but I think you get one of the top 5 girls in the entire competition at 13.
Yep. Are we? Do you want to do this, Lou, or do I want to do this?
I'll let you do it.
Yeah. So yeah, look, it was a great get for Adelaide, as was Georgia McKee, down in the 40s as a top 20 pick, potentially top 10. Yeah, look, Adelaide did a great job with that. Look, I think they did fantastic at making sure that they were able to secure those 2 players at such value picks, that happened to be in their home state, which is how I'm nicely trying to dance around it. I think they did a great job with that. But yeah, look, essentially it's a national draft. They could have gone anywhere, but I think, the Crows identified a couple who, clearly, like quite a few girls, would have preferred to have stayed home. And I think they did enough to convince them to do so and get there. And look, definitely no knock. There were quite a few in the same boat. And Adelaide walk away with a couple of steals for sure. Because, yeah, for me, Indy Rashid's clearly a top 5 pick. I think she could. There was a lot of clubs that were hit and miss with her. By all reports, if she was getting past Sydney, she was going to go to the Crows, which was the whole element. So it was going to be either she was going to end up in Sydney or at Adelaide, was basically what I'd got from the night. So yeah, for me, I think that once she got past there, she was heading all the way to the Crows, which I think would have been a really good relief. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, I think most prospects, when we chat to them, there's 2 kinds: the ones that go, "I'm happy to go anywhere, but I prefer to stay home," which is usually what happens, or, "I just want a chance, I'll go anywhere," type thing. And obviously they're in the former. But yeah, definitely, I think Adelaide, and it's their prerogative, just like any other club in a state, where they can try and get a player from their home state to last till their pick. But yeah, they did really well. They were able to steal them for low value. And I did see the quote from the Adelaide list manager going, if we had a top 5 pick, we'd take her in there. Yeah, like, I don't disagree with that. Like, they're absolutely, yeah, she's an absolute gun, as is Georgia McKee. But yeah, like, at the end of the day, another club could have taken her and they didn't. So I think she'll have a huge impact there, and she'll be really happy as well. Like, at the end of the day, you want them to be happy and want them to play their best footy, and their best footy was going to be in SA, so that's what happens. But yeah, time will tell how it all ends up. But for me, yeah, it was clearly a steal, and the Crows did really well to get them.
Mm-hmm. Pete, Liam, you got a question for Pete?
Not really. We had this discussion ad nauseum beforehand, and draft night, and the reason I was smiling is because my mock did have Rashid going to Adelaide, and because I sent Emma McDonald to Sydney, and I maintain that would have also been a good pick, but there was a lot of, and that's the thing with this draft, though. Like, there was conjecture about whether Zippy Fish would get to Carlton, and a lot of people, it looked like on the day that a lot of people thought, Fish could go to Melbourne at 2/3, or she should or she could get past the 2 New South Wales clubs and go to Carlton. Like, they were all very conceivable scenarios. and pick what the Demons did, kind of set off the first chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
What the Giants did the next pick set off the next, and it was just the whole draft was incredible to watch. And obviously the draft was done a couple of hours before it was broadcast, but it was really like watching it. It was like trying to put the pieces together. And especially as a Hawks fan, when we had that pick in the mid-teens, trying to work out who's going to get to us, or whether we would just take someone who's going to be around the mark, like a Lavinia Cox, who I was really keen on. Did my mock, had her going to us at our second pick. In the end, it looked like in the end, probably in the last couple of hours, it became clear that she's not getting there. Like, I suspect, looked like she might have gone to Brisbane or something if we didn't take her, from what I was gathering from reading on the AFL website. So, yeah, I don't really have a question other than just it was a nut. The draft was nuts, and a lot of clubs will be very happy with what they got because it was a very talented draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I 100% with you. I would do a few nuts and bolts here. Like, I know that, like I said, she was high on my list. She was one of my favorites to watch this year. Maybe just because I watched a lot of Waffle. Watched a lot of Waffle W. But Molly O'Hare to Melbourne, I think honestly, originally, if you would have told me this, I'd have thought you were nuts. I'd have thought there's no way they pass a Zippy Fisher and Dee Rashid early, especially if with Ash Centra going to Collingwood and Havana Harris, if they bid, she'll go to Gold Coast. So for you, I mean, how good a fit is Molly O'Hare at the Melbourne Demons, Pete? Because honestly, when I first saw this, I was like, this is a perfect pickup there because her quickness, her skill and ability. This is a huge pickup for the D's at 3 after they bid on Havana Harris.
Yeah, look, Molly O'Hare, well, she's one of my favourite players I've had all year. Like, she's one that I've eyed off for the last couple of years. And I guess this is my kind of funny moment where I sent to Liam pre-draft when there were rumours Melbourne were going to take her over Zippy Fish. I said, teaches me right for being a coward because I was going to have ahead of Zippy at the start of the year. And I literally said that I think Western Australia would implode if I did that because of the fact that, obviously they're both elite players. They're both
Mhm.
fantastic. But I was weighing up so heavily to put her ahead of Zippy in my phantom drafts through the year. And every time I thought about it, I'm like, no, I just can't. It's Zippy. Like, you just can't. And when I heard she was going to go higher, I was like, oh, geez, that was a missed opportunity. Like, they're both so high, though. They're such great players. But, yeah, she's a fantastic fit for Melbourne. She's a fit for anywhere, like, because she's such a great utility. She can play on all three lines. She's got speed, she's got skill, she's great aerially, she's great on the ground. Like, this is what I say, like, she probably has the least weaknesses in terms of her like overall profile. She's not like perfect at everything, but she's just so good at so many things, and the weaknesses are really not there in terms of what she can do. So I think for her, she's going to be an absolute great player for them. And she can play, as I said, on all three lines anywhere they want her. So tall midfielder, fine. Running half back where she likes to play, that's great. Wing, sure. Forward, she can do that. And 179 centimeters and moves the way she does is just fantastic. And she's got that leadership and competitiveness, like ticks every box, really. And as I said to Melbourne fans, despite what they would like to believe, considering obviously they lost Mithun, I said, this is a great trade to get pick 2. I said, to be honest, and this is no disrespect to players, but the value of pick 2, I would walk just about anyone out the door at my club for pick 2 because of how strong that is and how
Mhm.
good they are. So, yeah, it does suck that Melbourne lost Mithun and their heart and soul player and all that. But in terms of quality for quality, O'Hare is on another level, as most of these top end kids are. Like, we're
Mhm.
going to see them come in and absolutely impact like no others before them. So I think it will be not long before they go, gee, this kid goes all right. And yeah, she's just an absolute star. So I'm looking forward to seeing how she can impact.
I,
Yeah,
I love it as well throughout the year because I mean, as Donnie, you've listened, you guys have listened to enough of my weeks. Know I love tall midfielders at the best of times. But
Mhm.
and I think Pete, you and I had this conversation. She can do most of what Zippy Fish can do. She's just 8 inches taller.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yep. Yeah,
100%.
essentially.
Yep. No, I'm 100% with you. I know Pete can vouch for this. Is like I remember messaging him after the the Waffle versus Stanfield game last year, and I remember asking him. I said, I kept track of her, but she really showed out in that game between for the Stanfield and the Waffle. And I mean, her and Zippy Fish were two of the best players on the ground, and it wasn't like the Stanfield sent over chumps. They sent over some of their best players over there, and not just their youngsters. They sent over some of their best players. And Molly O'Hare and Zippy Fish were two of the best on the ground. And I remember asking, I said, tell me about this girl because I've been keeping an eye on both of them because it was like, especially when I found out this was it was a national draft, I was like, either one of these WA girls would be absolutely fantastic. And again, I wasn't anticipating the Swans being at 4 originally, so I didn't think there's no way they'll even come close to it. So the fact that I sat there in the draft going either or could end up at Sydney was absolutely fantastic. So we'll go to the I'll have my Swans fun. For the Swans, they get Zippy Fish, which I know several Swans fans are absolutely loving it. They think this is the perfect her nickname Zippy Fish. I mean, with the Swans, I mean this young lady is Mon Conti's twin. I mean, she's a clone, silky smooth with the ball. So, I mean, what are the Swans getting? Because again, country girl out of WA. It'll be interesting to see how she handles Sydney. But I think her talent shows. She's an absolutely electric player.
Yeah. No, absolutely. She's a star. Like she's been a star for a long time. One of those players. There's a few of them like your Centras and Lou Payne and Sarah Howley, like players that you haven't needed this year to justify where they were going to go. You knew for the last 2 to 3 years they're going to be a great player. And as I always say, when you're watching footy for, particularly at a young age, like under 16s or something like that, you generally put them into boxes, whether they're, could be something, got a couple of traits not complete to, yeah, they look like they're going to be a good player to, put the pen down and they're going to be a star. Like, there's no doubt from this point. And she's definitely one of those. Under 16s MVP when WA kind of just played themselves and has been very, very good for WA over the years, as well as obviously East Fremantle won Loon knit a medal for the best on ground in her bottom age season, came second in the league best and fairest this year. And realistically, I don't think it's too disrespectful to Jamie Harkin to say that if she played the extra game or two that she missed, would have potentially overtaken. But either way, both were so deserving. And yeah, for me, Zippy Fish is just, yeah, she's that small, but other than that, pretty much everything else she does well. Like particularly from an outside thing, I think contested obviously isn't really her go at the moment. But then, as I kind of say, you don't really park the Ferrari in the garage. You're not going to get her to scoop up the ball and give it to someone else. She's going to be the one receiving the ball and running away and then delivering it. Like she's the one you look after and just protect and just get the ball to her. She'll do the rest. Some of the highlights she produced out of the middle, where she'd burst past, get the handball, and then just go forward and hit a target inside 50 is exactly what you want. So, yeah, for me, from a skills perspective, she's probably top 2 or 3. So certainly I think Swans are going to get an absolute star. She'll be there round 1, and if fit, she'll play the whole year. So yeah, she's obviously ready-made, and you'll see that impact straight away compared to the other players, as we'll see with the Centra and a Harris and those kind of players. They're going to step up and immediately be in that, say, top 5 to 6 players, pretty much straight away. So yeah, they're going to have a real impact.
Yeah, definitely for sure. There's just so many solid, talented players in this draft. Again, it was you hate using the word because it's almost been used so much nowadays, but this could be the potential super draft. This could be a draft with so many 100 game players. It could be ridiculous. So we'll stay in the top level. And as you said, Pete, again, the first round was a little unpredictable, and I know that you were, as you said, silently celebrating in the teens when you were starting to get several right. So just looking at the first round, I mean, kind of your thoughts on it. Were there any surprises? As you said, you got some of them right. Any surprises that kind of came out of nowhere, or kind of a first round wrap of what you kind of thought of the first round? Because again, some absolutely electric players going to a lot of really good clubs.
Yeah, look, I think most players, like you'd probably say 75% of the players that went, you were expecting to go in the first round or thereabouts coming into the draft. I think you've got to look at Lexi Gregor was probably the one that surprised going as high as she did. There was word that Geelong were keen on her for along with a few other clubs. And she probably breaks the mold a bit because the whole draft was centered around athleticism and speed, things like that, where she doesn't really have that, but she's got absolutely elite contested marking ability and the fact that she can play on all three lines. So I think that's what really attracted them. They needed tools because they were perhaps the only side that struggled more than Collingwood in that regard. But like that's the thing, they're able to get her in, and as we said earlier, Telleridi as well. But for me, Gregor was probably the main bolter that we weren't expecting that high. I'd mocked her to Geelong's second pick, but clearly they didn't think she was going to get there. Cox, I went where I thought she would go when I did my Phantom, but then coming in like a couple of weeks earlier, obviously that would have been a bolter. Like she was a bit of a surprise, but again, upside, we're talking athleticism. She's fantastic in that way. Most of the other first rounders, Holly Ridewood went a little bit earlier than what we thought she would. Again, I was thinking late first round. I think I had her to Richmond in the last pick or something like that. But most of the others, I think, from a first round perspective, were pretty much around the market where most would have tipped coming in, like a few picks here or there. But I'm not too surprised with the first round, other than those couple of bolters, I think.
Definitely, for sure. So again, the first round was a little bit of everything. You had some bolters, you had some top level players that somehow, like I said, with Indy Rashid dropping to 13. Let's jump to round two, where I think there's some absolute guns that somehow found their way into round two. I mean, you have Grace Martin and Woodville at West Torrance. Like again, maybe it's just because of my watching the Samfel W and the Waffle W, but so many state league players. I mean, central districts of the Samfel W had three players. It was Charlotte Riggs, Jazz Evans, and what was the other one? Trying to think right off the top of my head. Georgia McKee. I mean, isn't it? It's great to see these young players get these state league shots and now get their chance at the AFLW because they're getting game time against women, and I think it's really going to help them going into it. So, just your thoughts on the impact of these state league players that are 18-year-olds that are playing in the state leagues, because I think they're getting a lot of really good experience there.
Yeah, look, well, for starters, Charlotte Riggs to West Coast at 24, I said it on the night, that is daylight robbery, and I cannot believe no other club picked him up. I genuinely, that is the most head scratching one for me. Obviously we spoke about Rashid being dropping down, but for me, Riggs dropping all the way to 24. She could have gone to the Bulldogs in that top 10. She was one of the considerations, and no doubt with the Bulldogs having the next pick. Whether or not they went two talls because they already went McDonald, they may not, but that was who they were keen on. So West Coast definitely had to snap her up there. She's an absolute star. Like, yeah, she's got to build on a few things, but she could be anything at her size and vertical leap. Grace Martin, she's just one of those stories you just love to hear. Like, they 12 months ago, no one really thought she was going to be in draft consideration, or I should say probably low down the draft, because she had to work on a few things. Like she wasn't really utilizing her speed as best she could. She worked so damn hard over the off season, and that's what everyone said coming out of South Australia. So that was one of the feel good stories that she was able to get herself up to the point of where you went, yeah, she's a top 30 player. And for her to go that high was absolutely fantastic, which off the top of my head, without looking, I think she was the second South Australian behind Rashid, I think, off my top of the
Yep,
head,
yep.
which is a great result for her. So yeah, I think that's a really good indication for her. Oh, sorry, and Poppy Schultz, yeah, that's the other one that I was
Yeah,
thinking
Poppy
of to go
Schultz.
up,
Yep.
of course. Yeah, of course. But yeah, still the third one to go overall. Yeah, she'll be ready made. She can play on all three lines. She'll be great for the Giants. And some of the others, yeah, you mentioned Evans. Again, she's just so skillful. She's again probably top five in terms of skills in the draft. Just needs that athleticism side, not as fit or quick as some of the others, but again, that'll come with time. So I think that'll be great. McKee, again, like she was one that was. Look, I don't think it's a secret to say she wanted to stay in Adelaide. I think everyone kind of knew that. So there was the general indication she would slide to Adelaide's next selection. It was just whether or not Port were going to spoil the party and go, nah, we'll take her, or another club back themselves in. So I think for McKee, it's great for her. She's happy. She wants to play there. And if they get the most out of her, like, then geez, she's going to be an absolute star, because she genuinely could have been among the top picks in this year's draft, top 5 on her best ability. This year was a bit of a write-off. She came off her ACL, didn't quite reach the heights she could have, but geez, she's a star when she's able to get out on the park. So I think she's really good. And it was also, since you're mentioning State League, great to see Lucy Boyd get a gig too.
Hmm.
This is a story of someone who at the start of the year I know was pretty keen to remain in South Australia, and I think that is a case of someone who you want to get your chance, and you've got to then look at the realistic options and go, hey, if I'm going to play AFLW, I'm going to have to move into state, and that's a story of where they did. And I can guarantee there's probably 7 or 8 players at least on this list that would have preferred to stay in their home state, but they travelled because they want to chase that dream. And that's something that they've got to weigh up, because I think for a lot of the girls at the start of the year, particularly, it is a bit daunting to go, hey, I got to move out of home, I got to do this, not sure what's going to happen. But to see her get picked up and happy to go to West Coast, and I think obviously having Charlotte Riggs going with her helps as well. But it's
Hmm.
just great to see her come along and be able to be open to that, along with a lot of the other girls. So yeah, to see some of the players we see through those state leagues succeed is great, and I'm happy they were able to achieve their dream.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then I know that with the Swans picking up Sarah Steele Parker, who played at North Adelaide as well. I mean, I look at this Central Districts team. They get 3 girls drafted from a team that the previous season had won a premiership. It was interesting to see it, and they still got Sophie Eaton still to come in a future draft. So Central Districts is starting to turn into quite the little South Australian. Producer of talent. So it's been fantastic to watch. Well, let's have a little fun. I always do this, and again, this is a draft where it's very easy to ask this question. Is let's actually take the first 2 rounds out. Let's have some fun with this. Round 3 and 4. After it, who's a pick in these later picks in round 3, like round picks 37 through 60. Who's a pick that you could see maybe finding a way to debut round 1 and surprise a lot of people, being a huge pickup? Let's take Georgia McKee out, because I think that was kind of one of those that it was more of the situation of her wanting to stay in South Australia. So take Georgia McKee out. Who's a pick in that area that you think could find their way into round 1?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many mature ages that are there. I think it's probably unfair to sort of point out one of them. You got Alana G, as you said, the Swans pair, Reed and Steele Park, Dunlop for Geelong. Clearly, with their ruck crisis, she could just slot straight in if it happens again next year. Hardingham again for the Bulldogs is another one ready to go. If we're taking those off the table, who clearly are ready made to step in, I think a few that stand out. Tara Harrington at Gold Coast, if she can get a gig, she can play on all 3 lines. I think she'll play pretty early. Violet Patterson, due to the fact that
Hmm.
Collingwood just aren't very good, and the fact that she's ready made, like she's played Sample W level, she could play anywhere as
Hmm.
well. So I think she should get in pretty early. The other one who I think after Riggs, the other biggest steal of the draft for me was actually the Hawks, Ali Simons. I had her ranked at 12th in my power rankings, which clearly going in the 40s is a bit ridiculous. So, but again, it comes down to only a couple of clubs being interested in you. And once Essendon had used up their picks, Hawks were the other team, and they got a real steal there. So, obviously, Liam would know more about her and whether, like, know more about whether there's a spot for her there. But certainly in terms of her value and ready to go, she is. Obviously, there's some fitness she's still building back from, had some stress fractures at the start of the year. But in terms of her, once she's up and going, if she's fully fit, she's way better than the selection that they had her at. And she showed it throughout the year, even in her game she got for Vic Country and whatnot. So, yeah, for me, there are a few of the ones at that back end that should be featuring early on.
Yeah, I agree. Like,
Trying to figure out in the first year with Simons, I'll probably figure out what is her position, because she can play everywhere, almost to a point of it being to her detriment. Because a lot of clubs, like I would suspect, like they don't know what to do with her at the moment. So I suspect Hawthorn will say, we got a year, we don't need you to play a lot. I think Flockhart's probably the most likely of our draftees to get regular game time. She seems the most ready to go. Of our crop, Rebecca Clotty might get some games because we really need small forwards. But there's two more names I would actually add to that list, if I may quickly. Lulu Field at Carlton, because Carlton just are in dire need of some people in their backline who, their backline is just not very good. And Evie Parker at Fremantle as well, who has a profile that screams I should be a really high draft pick as a 179 centimeter winger who can play the wing role really well. I think the Dockers have someone who, if they can develop a few things, have someone who could be really handy as well and could really step in pretty quickly and really fill an important role. And with her size, create some options as well.
Mm-hmm. Nah, definitely for sure. So I'm gonna have I have at least a couple more for you, Pete. And I'm one of those. I love it. I love a good story, and I got to admit, it made me chuckle a little bit hearing a familiar name there in round 3 at pick 51. Indy Strom, Mim Strong's younger sister, gets picked up by Fremantle. And I gotta ask this because I'm. Is this how? What do you think of this pickup for them? Because again, the Strom sisters, the AFLW love a good family story.
Yeah, they do. I think that she's probably obviously the other one that is clear was the Wackfer sisters, and I think
Mhm.
Strom's a bit more advanced, even though she's had less experience per se. Like I think she's a bit more advanced than Zoe was coming in. She kind of this was her first real full Waffle W season. She did play Rogers Cup a few years back, but she came in. She's similar, obviously tall and is able to compete really well in defence. She's still very raw, so I don't know. Depends on injury crisis. I don't think she'll get heaps of games compared to some of the other mature ages because she is still developing her craft and things like that. But look, she did enough to be on the extended squad for the Waffle W initially, and look, she showed plenty of signs throughout the year. She became really comfortable in the South Fremantle defence, and she's someone who I think they can see developable traits and get better from where she is, which is really good. And clearly, the video that circulated with Mim surprising her is rarely ever going to get beaten, I think, considering they didn't tell her it was her sister. So, yeah, I think good luck trying to beat that for a recruitment video. Yeah, it was a great story, absolutely. And look, she's got potential. It's just whether they can harness it. So, yeah, we'll see how they go with it.
Yeah, it was definitely had to chuckle at that. It was fantastic. But I love the great stories. I know that the Hamilton sisters up at the Sydney Swans, the Kelly sisters, now both at Adelaide. So I love the family, how they find a way to get family in the AFLW. It's fantastic. So I will go a little Swan centric here for the next couple of questions here. First, we'll start off. We've talked about Zippy Fish. Again, I will talk up Zippy Fish forever, but the Swans did pick up a few more towards the end of the draft. They had 3 of the last 8 picks of the draft. They pick up Amelia Martin, a Swans Academy player, and then Caitlin Reed out of the Geelong VFLW and Sarah Still Parker out of North Adelaide, who is their runner last season. Just a little bit about those 3, and then with Amelia, what are we bringing in? Another Swans Academy player, a local product, especially after picking up Imogen Brown in the trade period.
Yeah, Amelia Martin was probably the surprise one, I guess, in many ways of the Swans nominations because clearly the other couple had draft nominees and from other clubs and everything like that. So was sort of looking towards that way with Janasia and Vierhus, who unfortunately didn't get picked up. But Amelia Martin was the third one they nominated that kind of gave you an idea that they were keen. She's a really tough sort of midfielder, worked really well with Imogen Brown, actually. Those two were of the group earlier in the year, the surprise packets. They were probably the two that really found plenty of the ball. She's pretty tough, can win the ball on the inside, but also go forward and she competes well one-on-one. So I think she'll be that sort of forward with the option of being a mid-rotation in the future. So she adds quite a bit to that sort of hardened ball winning ability. But she does have a bit of pace and burst about her as well, which really catches the eye. So I think she definitely has those traits that can be developable going forward. Where the other two that you mentioned, Caitlin Reid, being a ruck forward for not just Geelong VFL, that got her probably to get that next step and show she can compete there. She's been one of the best players, if not the best player, in the AFL Sydney for a number of years now. She's been dominant for East Coast Eagles, won best on ground in the grand final, just complete another level really compared to a lot of the other players. And yeah, she's so strong, does well one on one. As I said, can play ruck or forward. She's someone who could come in immediately and play a key role there. And definitely, obviously, if you have a lot of injuries to Tall, she's really good to be able to fill in. She's had that state league experience now across multiple states. And same with Steel Park as well. Obviously, as you said, runner, train on. She's been playing, I believe, midfield when she was with them, but she did play defence for North Adelaide, and she did well there. Like she was one that just kept doing a job each week. So clearly, she's just a player that can be proven to play a role, and I suspect she probably will play in defence if she's not given, say, a tagging role, which is another thing that she could do. But she played in defence for North and did really well there throughout their premiership year as well. So. Yeah, I think she's someone who, and she played for the AFLW team too, I should say. But yeah, she's someone who will probably play in defence and be able to just do a job each week, which obviously, as you mentioned with Van Loon, is another one who can just be really honest in her positioning. And at the end of the day, it's pick 61 in the draft, so you're not exactly expecting, a ready-made, brilliant, elite player. But what she offers is just really great consistency. And I think she's a very good player, and she showed she was among the best in the state league when she did play. So she definitely deserves her chance.
Mhm. And then I'll go off kind of as you started again. A couple of the Swans Academy girls did not get picked up that had nominated as Swans Academy players. Do you see a way for them finding a way into the AFLW, or is it going to be something where they're going to have to find a way through the state leagues to find their AFLW opportunity?
Yeah, well, there were three clubs that passed, so it means three clubs have a list spot at the moment. Obviously, with plenty to open up if there's injuries that end up going long term and needing more SSP type players. But yeah, look, I think they're definitely a shot. They've got some great traits. Janasia is the one that I was a bit surprised didn't get picked up. I for sure thought she was going to get picked up. National Academy member, had a really good year for Sydney. I thought she had a much better year this year compared to last, and all the signs were pointing to her getting picked up. I do worry sometimes with the Northern Academy members that if you're a part of that, other clubs tend to think you're just going to go there so they don't do as much work into you. We saw that with Siobhan Ross as well. Gold Coast missed out, who had a really strong year and thought she was going to get picked up. And the three GWS girls didn't get picked up as well. So you've obviously got Patton and Ellie Hall and Prosser Shaw as well. Like it, generally the feeling is that they'll get picked up by their local club, and if they're not, then yeah, they tend to not have as much work done as others, which is kind of a disadvantage. So the Northern Academies can be a great advantage for players, but also I feel they can be a disadvantage in some regards, particularly in a league where resources are scarce because they've got to focus on X amount of players. And at the end of the day, they're like, all right, we're going to put more time and effort into these ones who are open pool. So I would love to see more Northern Academy kids taken by other clubs if they're obviously left off the board. But in saying that, it's a very strong group. And I think of those left off that if they can have another good year next year, they might mix between playing talent league again or playing senior footy. I think the best thing they can do is try and get into a state league outside the one they've been playing. So whether that's VFL, Samful, Waffle, Quaffle, whichever one, and just show their ability at a different level compared to say AFL Sydney. They just get an extra runs on the board there, like what Caitlin Reid did, and they're obviously a lot younger than her. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go. I think they definitely deserve their chance, and Janasia the most unlucky of that lot. Along with Patton as well. So yeah, they're certainly deserving of spots if they get it.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I was hoping maybe they can even find a way to get Janasia for the Swans, get her as a train on, because unfortunately with ACL injuries and everything like that, you never know. Maybe you can get lucky and uh, get her as a sign on as a full time off as an injury reserve. So you never know. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, because I was like you. I was sitting there the entire draft going, okay, is one of these 55, 58, 15, those 50s picks. And I was like, are they going to be able to steal her that late? And then Saw the three picks and went, interesting. They didn't pick her up. So it was one of those. It was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. But I mean, maybe they feel that with Zippy Fish and a few of the others they already have, that they're already filled at that wing position. So it'd be fascinating to see. Hey, this is one of those drafts where this anything could possibly happen. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I know you two have spent a lot of time talking with each other on that. So we'll do my usual. Let's talk about next year. Let's talk about the next draft. Which I mean, again, I'm interested to hear, as we kind of stated off mic. I mean, the Gold Coast Suns are going to have their Gold Coast Suns are going to have an interesting off season because they are absolutely loaded at the top part of the draft at Gold Coast Suns Academy players.
Yeah, they are. Ava Russia, to kick us off, really.
Back in
Yeah,
40 minutes, halfway through talking about Ava Russia.
yeah. Look, the best player I've ever seen from the women's game, and it's not close. Like her highlights are out of this world. She's like we know how great the Lauren Youngs and the Ash Centras have been. She is just there's no superlative to describe how good she is and what she can do. Because she's able to step around five players, hit a target while being tackled under pressure, or take the ball out of a stoppage 45, wheel around and just kick a goal. Like, it's just unbelievable. And the fact that we were robbed of it, like, I know obviously for her it's a lot worse because she's the one going through the knee injury, but I think a lot of people also felt a bit robbed because we were so looking forward to seeing what she could do, given that at 15 she already looked like she'd be walking into an AFLW club and being one of the best players, if not the best player there. So I really hope she's fully fit and can get back and do what she does, because she doesn't really have a weakness. She's just incredible across the board. If there was another way that another club could get her, you'd move heaven and earth to get her. And that's just the first pick. So that's even before we get to your Georgia Davises, who, just an elite athlete. They just keep the Davis family have done a great job for AFLW for sure. Clearly, and each edition has something different to offer too, which is great. And she'll go the highest of all of them, really. So that'd be great. Dakota Barron's the other one we've spoken about. Like, she's just a contested marking forward who can play ruck, but had really worked on her athleticism too over the last 12 months. So she's kind of added that to her game. You got Alana Welsh, who's got a lot of talent there. I think for her, it's just learning about your limitations and just maybe handballing it off rather than snapping a fair bit. But look, aside from that, she's an absolute great talent and should be around that top 10 mark if she can keep improving. You got Sunny Lappin, father-daughter, who'll probably go to Carlton. And to be honest, I think Gold Coast won't mind too much because they got their hands full with all the others I've mentioned. And then, as I sort of said, you got Annabelle Folk, you got Bronte Parker, who are another couple who are in the mix. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to have their hands full. It's going to be tough with Gold Coast and trying to work it out, but they're definitely going to be really, really strong from their academy. And WA is another state that's going to have a lot of good talent too. So I think for that, those two states, and I'm told SA will have a few surprise packets that pop up as well as their strong talent they've already got. So they're probably going to be the teams to beat, as you'd expect.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I know there's a couple that I was looking at. I know Mia Russo out of West Perth was another one that I love her game. I thought she was fantastic. And I'm looking at your draft guide at the top 25, and it's like how many of us like Suns Academy, Suns Academy. I remember reading it just going, I mean, holy crap, the Suns are gonna like they might have to do a fire sale just to get half of these girls, let alone. So I think a few are probably gonna get away, and I agree that, as you kind of said in the men's, like I think a lot of the people in Vic need to understand that this is good for the competition, that they're producing so many great players, because eventually some of them are going to get to other clubs and they're going to be able to benefit everybody on this one. It'll be fascinating. I just cannot wait. It'll be interesting. I know Sophie Eaton, another Central District product, is in your top 25. I've loved her game. Be interesting to see how she does at Central Districts this year, because she was an absolute gun on that. So it's going to be absolutely insane. But like, fellas, Again, this was just an insane free agency and draft. Again, I'm so looking forward to this talent getting into the AFLW and everything like that because I think it only is going to help the league and make it get better and better and better. Cannot wait. And Liam, I'll jump to you just as we kind of wrap up here again. How are things going at the Soaring to New Heights podcast? I know you and your co-host do, I mean, yeoman's work for the Hawthorne Hawks, but again, what you do personally for the AFLW, it's absolutely insane. So just kind of how are things going with you guys, and do you have any plans for the off season?
Thank you for asking. First of all, it's going well. Tim, my co-host, we very passionate about what we do. So we're recording this very late at night on the 23rd of December, and I'm going to have to get up about 6 a.m. tomorrow to get cooking again for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day because we're hosting back to back. So that'll be fun with Mum and I in the kitchen pretty much for 2 days non-stop. But yeah, it's going well. We actually are tomorrow morning, so on the morning of Christmas Eve, I think all things being equal, putting out our Hawthorn off-season recap. So we've got that queued up, ready to go, where basically I'll go through all the draftees based on my own watching of them, some conversations I've had with Peter, and what else I've been able to gather. Go through our recruits, go through what the Hawks did. So Tim and I had quite a good chat about that. So that'll probably be out by the time this comes out, I would say. That was a really fun conversation. But yeah, we're probably going to take a little break and then, well, I've got to gear up for the VFLW because that's next mission is covering Box Hill in the VFLW. But I'll be all over women's footy still like a cheap suit because I just love watching it, love covering it, and enjoy doing the draft stuff as well. So yeah, Soaring to New Heights is going well. If you're a Hawks fan and you don't listen to us, wherever you're listening to this, wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll find Soaring to New Heights, where we remove some of the impartiality I've attempted to show tonight and just unabashed two very passionate Hawks fans talking about the W.
There's nothing wrong with that. I absolutely love your guys' work. It's absolutely a fantastic. Again, I may be a Swans fan, but I appreciate people that love the women's sport. I think it's fantastic. And then Pete, I know as we were talking off mic, you have a little bit of a break now because you kind of have this crazy period of men's draft, women's draft. I know there's still plenty going on at Rookie Me Central, but at least on the footy side, a little bit of a breather before you hit 2025 on the run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sort of designated myself to work through the Christmas New Year period, but it is a little easier. It's more just getting things ready for the new year and preparing everything, and but it's a little bit of a slower pace, which is nice because November, December, up till obviously the women's draft is just absolutely bonkers. So, yeah, pretty happy to have that little bit of an easier pace for the start of the year. And then, of course, for those who don't know, Rookie Me does all the testing for the athletes. So well, through the first couple of months, I'll be traveling interstate to go interview the 2025 crop. So, yeah, it'll be really fun. Again, tiring, but really fun. So yeah, WA is first up in mid-Jan, so that'll be really good for me. And yeah, I think it'll be just good to switch off from footy for at least a couple of weeks and just have a bit of a break. So this is probably the last thing I'm doing from a footy perspective. And yeah, just looking forward to attacking the new year and everything. And yeah, just it's just great to do, really. And that's why I like seeing things that, like, obviously you, Donny, and then back home with what Liam and that do with Soaring to New Heights. Like, that kind of effort that people put in for volunteer work is just fantastic. And definitely from an Australian point of view, what Liam does is yeah, far and beyond anyone else. So yeah, it's really great to see that, and obviously, yeah, bringing the game to America as well is fantastic. What you do too, so it's really great to sort of link up and be able to have chat footy and find people who are just as passionate about it, which is great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Like I said, I ran into Tim and Liam talking with them, and it's been a great combination. I have to get them both on next year for an AFLW review. It just the schedules just did not work out this year, so I'm definitely gonna have to give them on next year to get them help them do a review. I know it's hard to step away from that Hawthorne love, but it's fun to talk with those two, both very passionate women's footy fans as much as they are Hawks fans. So. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it again. This has been another fantastic season. This will end my regular coverage for the footy for 2024. As bittersweet as it is, it'll be nice to kind of take a few days off And then as I have been starting up, I will do my off-season supporter series in Jan and February, where I will be talking with international and American fans. I want to find some more Yanks and some international fans that love their footy and talk about that because it's fun. I've done a few years where I've talked to Australians. I thought, let's go back and do just like my first year. Let's find Americans and international fans. So keep an eye out. That will be coming up probably in those first couple of weeks of January, and that will run all the way until March when the AFLW season gets going, and then the footy gets back going again in March. Cannot wait. So that's going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, if you like what you're listening to, please like and subscribe. If you're a Hawks fan and you love women's footy, soaring to new heights is definitely worth a listen. And if you love your draft and you love finding out about the future of the AFL and AFLW, Rookie Me Central, absolutely quality work that they do there. So thank you again so much for listening, and we'll be back with more footy coverage very soon.